Hi guys, welcome to another roster review. Today we are going to be looking at the list that Aaron took to the London GT and is a Leviathan Tyranid list. So very special today guys, I am not going to run you through the list. The newest member of Team Glasshammer on the content team, Aaron Mosquera from Team Gibraltar, is actually going to run you through the list himself, how he got on with it, how it works, the secondaries, how to tackle it, and finally any changes he would make to his list. If you're going to a tournament this weekend, you probably want to watch this video because there will be a lot of similar Tyranid lists to this at tournaments this weekend, because this will be the last hurrah for them as the balanced data slate inevitably comes out next week. So I'm going to hand you over to Aaron to tell you what's in his list.
Hi guys, so I'm really happy and really excited to finally be on the team, and this is my first proper content, so I'm really excited to show this. So this is my Leviathan Tyranids list. It is the one I took to the LGT, and I'm just going to run through what's in the list. So first things first, it's Leviathan, and for the adaptive trait I've gone for augmented ferocity, and then it's a patrol and a fortification network. So in the patrol, I've got my warlord, who's my winged hive tyrant. He has the Reaper of Obliterax as his relic and direct guidance as his warlord trait, and I've paid for him to have adrenal glands and toxin sacs as well. Then I've got a neurothrope, and I've paid for him to have the synaptic tendrils warlord trait as well as his warlord trait. Then there's two troops in here, which is two 8-man units of warriors with adrenal glands. Both units have dual bone swords and death spitters. Then in the elite slot, I've got 2 units of 3 zoanthropes. One of them has paroxysm as their spell, and the other one has neuroparasite. And then technically elite slots, but they're a non-force org. I have a unit of Tyrant Guard and a 3rd unit of zoanthropes as well. Then nothing in fast attack. So right under heavy support, I have a unit of 3 biovores in there, which are really cool. And then I've got 2 flyers, 2 harpies with stranglethorn cannons. One of them has the synaptic enhancement upgrade. And then in the fortification network, I have a sporicist as the single piece there. So that's everything that's in the list. And now we'll get on to exactly what it does, how it works, and how you can use it in an event. Okay guys, now on to how the list works and how you can go about playing this list. So obviously it's Leviathan. We know Leviathan, transhuman, they're really strong and tough. And I've gone for augmented ferocity as my adaptive, which gives the entire army +1 to charge. This army loves combat, especially the warriors and the flying. So being able to have that being able to get into combat a lot more reliably is really important. So that's why I've taken that. So the first unit in the army to talk about is the winged hive tyrant. He's incredible. Obviously, everyone knows that he's so good if you've seen him on the tabletop. He has the Reaper of Obliterax as his relic, which allows him to do mortals every time he does a wound, and he ignores face caps, which is really important in the meta right now, with things like Bloodthirsters, Abaddon, and Catan running around. So he's really good for that. With adrenal glands, he moves 17 with that and is able to just be a threat on the table constantly. Wherever he is, your opponent needs to worry about him being there, because he can go in, kill something, and then use the overrun stratagem in order to fly back to the Tyrant Guard in safety. So he's great. And with direct guidance, he gives a unit of warriors +1 to hit. This means that warriors can be hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s for the tyrant. The tyrant has an ability to just give a core unit reroll 1s, so it makes the warriors really effective as well. I think having a tyrant is really important, and it leads into the Tyrant Guard. The Tyrant Guard are essential on the list as well, because I was thinking about not using the Tyrant Guard, but I think they're really important to protect the Tyrant as long as possible. Obviously now, if the Tyrant does die, we lose Imperatives as a Tyranid army, which is quite big for Leviathan, which we'll get onto with their psychic powers in a bit. And I think that it's pretty necessary to have that, so that's why he is very important to keep alive. He is the main big power hitter of this army, and he can wipe units himself. Secondly, we've got the neurothrope. The neurothrope is really important. He's really cheap for 100 points, an amazing caster, casting twice. Having an innate +1 to cast as a neurothrope is really good. And the ability to give a unit 3d6 to cast. This is really nice for things like psychic actions when we get onto secondaries, and really important powers like Catalyst, Onslaught, or Hive Nexus. Like I said earlier, Leviathan has Hive Nexus as a power, which allows a core unit to go into an imperative, will act as if they have that imperative. So I can give a unit of warriors an invul for a turn, even though normally they wouldn't have it, or I could give them exploding 6s in combat, things that just really help to stack these buffs on these Leviathan warriors. So the neurothrope is really important, and giving him synaptic tendrils allows him to give that buff of 3d6 to cast to 2 different units, which is really important, because especially when we get to the zoanthropes later, they can do a real high amount of mortal wounds, especially if they roll high, and giving 3d6 to cast really allows that to be done pretty effectively all the time, or having the option of that and then these more reliable casts as well. So he's really good. Also, he has the ability to heal Zoanthropes and Neurothropes, and when you have 3 units of Zoanthropes and a Neurothrope, the healing really does add up quite quickly, and any little mistakes and damage that your opponent might deal to the Zoanthropes can be quickly healed up in a single psychic phase. So that's really nice. The big meat and potatoes of the list, obviously, are the Warriors. I think Warriors are one of the best data slates in Tyranids, if not the best. Obviously, the classic loadout of dual bone swords and death spitters. The fact that the war gear is free means you go for the best option, and those are the best option, giving you damage too, and an extra range support as well. In Leviathan, I think warriors are incredible, obviously. Transhuman warriors that you can stack all these buffs, like Catalyst for 5 for no pain, and the Invalon really makes them really hard to kill. And then you toe that up with the Reinforced Hive Node stratagem, which is -1 damage, and then these warriors are really hard to kill, while also dealing an incredible amount of damage, which is why they're such a threat and so widely taken. And in this specific type of list, where it's all about damage, which we'll get to, it's not really about trying to stay alive. The warriors are the survivability in the list because they just stick around while also doing a lot of damage. So they're incredible. Again, they work really well with the Tyrant, they work really well with the Neurothrope as well. The big difference of my list compared to a lot of lists is taking 9 Zoanthropes. The Zoanthropes are something where I really love them. I think they are a bit pricey at 150 points for a unit, but the amount of mortal wounds they can do is incredible. The list mainly runs around mortal wounds and spore mines, which we'll get to, but the big hitters in the psychic phase are the Zoanthropes. The fact that they get +1 to cast for Witchfire for every model that they have in the unit means that they're casting things like Neuroparasite, Psychic Scream, and Smite on +3. And these are hard powers to get off, something like Neuroparasite being a 7. Getting it off on essentially a 4 is really, really good. But then the fact is, when they cast Smite, they get +1 to the damage of +1 mortal wounds dealt for every single model in the unit, which means a regular Smite is D3 +3, which is pretty awesome. And then it means that a super Smite is D6 +3. And the amount of 8 and 9 mortal wounds that I dealt in this event was crazy. And being able to give a unit 3d6 to cast means that on average you're gonna be able to get things like those 8s, the 8s on the dice, 2 4s or 3 and a 5, and then +3, that's an 11. That's a super Smite right there. On average, you're dealing something like upwards of 6 to 9 mortal wounds, which is amazing. Especially having 3 units, which is something that the opponent wasn't really expecting a lot of times. People usually see 1 or 2, but I think skewing into the mortals they can do is really cool. Also, they're very defensive as well. They are transhuman, they are T5 with 4 wounds. They're no slouches. With a 4-up invul and the ability to heal from the Neurothrope, they are very, very hard and very easy to stick around. Again, the Tyrant Guard, I glossed over them a bit with the Tyrant. They're just a bit of an essential. They have a 2-up save, so 1-up in cover. They're very tanky with T6, and they're able to keep the Tyrant protected, which is essential in a Tyranid list, especially nowadays. They just sit on a back objective, or they sit on a little ruin in the middle of the board. They're able to allow my Tyrant to overrun back and be a nice little tough unit that the opponent has to always worry that's there. They can't really dedicate fire, even if you expose one holding the terrain. Because of how tanky they are and the threat of all the other units on the board, they can't really deal with the Tyrant. So they're very nice staying there. The next unit are the Biovores. Biovores, this is where we start getting into the spore mines of the list. Spore mines are incredible. A single spore mine is, I believe, 10 points to take if you just take a spore mine in your army list. But obviously when you summon them, they're free. So whatever you summon, you don't have to pay points for, you just get the benefit. And Biovores, they do have a shooting profile that they could shoot some mortals, but the main thing you do with them is you do an action in the shooting phase, which allows you to summon D3 spore mines per Biovore within 48 inches of the Biovores. That is huge. That is essentially most of the board. So they can basically put spore mines wherever you want. And the big thing about spore mines is that they are so versatile. First thing with spore mines, if at any point the spore mine or your opponent ends a move in which at any point they got within 3 inches of the spore mines during the move or at the end, you can choose to blow up. Currently, as written, you don't have to blow up. You decide what unit the spore mines blow up on. And on a 2 to a 4, you deal a mortal wound, and on a 5-up, you deal D3 mortal wounds per spore mine. So on average, these Biovores are summoning 6 spore mines. That is a ton of mortal wounds they can do. Also, even though the spore mines are ignored for movement purposes, you can move through spore mines, you cannot finish on top of them because they're a physical model. So they're also an amazing way of move blocking opponents, especially units such as vehicles, or if you play armies like knights, they can be very good pseudo move blocking units. And that was something I did throughout the entire event, being able to box people into their little corners or into their deployment is something that's very powerful, while also threatening little small units that maybe they want to try and screen with, because you can just blow up these spore mines and deal a lot of mortal wounds. So they're incredible. They are amazing unit to just sit on the back, do an action the first turn if you want, something like maybe raising a banner or an action secondary like a data scry or something like that, and then being able to summon the spore mines in the games that you need them. They're incredible, and they just sit in the back. They just sit out of line of sight, and they just chill for the entire game, which is lovely, and screen out my opponent from doing any actions as well. The next thing, also leading into the mortals, are the harpies. Harpies, you know, just saying the name harpy right now, you know how good they are. They're amazing. Aircraft right now is still very powerful. A lot of people are bringing flyers. They are Stranglethorn Harpies, which means that they're not quite as powerful as Venom Cannon Harpies, but there are guns that Stranglethorns are really good into. You know, they are strength 8 - 2 damage, but they have D3 + 3 shots each, which means on average you're getting a lot more shots. You're getting essentially 10 shots per Harpy. And there are a lot of targets where the -2, maybe not into Armor Contempt armies, -2 is not the best, but into other armies, it's still a decent amount of AP, and damage 2 is still very nice. So you still get some damage out of the Harpies, but the big thing is that they deal mortal wounds, both when they either fly over a unit, or if they just fly over the ground, they can summon 3 Spore Mines. So again, another way of getting Spore Mines in the list, another 3 per Harpy, so that's another 6. More of the same with the Biovores, how good the Spore Mines are. Or again, if you really need to bomb, you can bomb things like vehicles. Very good against things like Silent King or Eldar platforms, where you get to roll 6 dice for each vehicle, up to 10, so you can really be doing a lot of mortal wounds. So Harpies are great. They allow you to threaten things that normally can be hidden. The last unit, which is quite interesting, obviously, is the Sporicist. This is something that's not really seen a lot. A few people have taken them, and it's quite interesting, but it's not something that has really made its way into a lot of Leviathan lists. But I really like it. So the Sporicist is a fortification, so it needs to be deployed 3 inches from walls, but it's to the base. And if you look at the model there, it's quite big, quite a huge model, but the actual base isn't too big. So there is some maneuverability in certain boards to actually hide it and keep it behind a ruin to keep it quite safe, because it's not that defensive. It's only got a 4-up save, it's only got 10 wounds at T7, but if you do hide it, then it's perfectly fine. And it does an action in the movement phase this time in order to summon 6 Spore Mines within 18 of it. And 6 Spore Mines flat is great, because now that means you're getting 6 Spore Mines from the Biovores, 6 Spore Mines from the Sporicist, and 6 Spore Mines from the Harpies if you don't bomb as well. So an average of 18 Spore Mines a turn, which you can start covering the board with Spore Mines. The amount of maulers you can do, the amount of move blocking you can do is incredible. And the Sporicist was really good for me. It also has some shooting, which is okay, but that's the main reason for it to be there. It's an annoying unit that your opponent can't really get to, that's constantly summoning Spore Mines. And with the 18-inch range, a lot of the times I found that I could have the Sporicist just behind a wall in my deployment zone and be able to reach the center objective with these Spore Mines, and being able to put a bunch of 6 to 12 Spore Mines in the center objective really locks that objective down. Because if your opponent wants to try and take the objectives, both for primary, some missions have, you know, hold the center for 3 points, or hold a new objective in the no man's land, or for their secondaries, certain armies like even Necrons with Treasures of Eons and things trying to get to the center, being able to block off that center with mortals and say, if you come on that center, I'm going to blow up and I'm going to destroy that unit. Or not being able to even land on the center, is something that was really powerful and something I really enjoyed being able to do. So the main thing about the list is the incredible amount of damage it does. The mortals it does, the immortals it can do in the psychic phase, it can do mortals obviously in the opponent's movement phase with the Spore Mines, and also even things like the Flyer in himself, or the Winged Hive Tyrant. He can do so much damage with the Reaper of Obliterax. And there are some armies that just cannot deal with the amount of mortal wounds you pump out. This list tables people with mortals. I think twice in the event, I killed 2 units with shooting and combat, and the rest of the army I killed was purely with mortal wounds. This thing can pump out so many mortal wounds. It's an incredible amount of damage. I'd recommend to give it a try. I love the list, and I really enjoyed running it. Whatever happens in the data slate happens, but right now it's a really fun list, and I've really enjoyed it. So that's how it works. That's how every single unit is. That's the main army list. Let's go on to see how you can tackle it and how this list struggles into certain areas. Okay, so how to tackle this list, how to beat it. I think there are 3 things that this list can struggle into, which are the main things that you wouldn't really want to see going up against this if you were playing this army. The first one is heavy OBSEC armies. Obviously, all I really have in this list is 2 blocks of warriors with OBSEC and no other way of getting OBSEC. A lot of armies, such as things like Harlequins or Eldar that can use Will of Azurian to give OBSEC, can very easily get on objectives and take primary away from me. Especially with things like banners as a secondary I like to take with this army as well. Being able to take down banners from me just really starts to hurt my points, and there's not really much I can do with this. The only heroic intervention I really have that's a threat is the Hive Tyrant, so if you take an objective off me, and you can deal with the spore mines that were on that objective, there's nothing I can do with it really. Like, that'll just stop dropping my points. And if I start going behind in a game, Tyranids don't score too highly unless they really start to put pressure on early and, you know, kill the opponent off. So if you're dropping the primary early game, I could end up with a loss at the end of the game. The second thing, which ties into the third one as well, is ways to get around transhuman and get around the toughness of the army. Everything's really strong, lots of wounds, lots of toughness, and you can only wound them on a 4-up. But the biggest issue are things like rerolls to wound. So we're looking at things like Abaddon's Warlord trait giving to a unit of Black Legion Terminators, because that was a game I played, giving them rerolls to wound, that can hurt. Things like Tau with Exemplar the Monk card giving rerolls to wound. Being able to just get around that 4-up invul as well. Destroyers, Locust Destroyers with their strat. Just ways that all that the list has with that sense of defensibility is the toughness. And getting around that just by adding efficiency to your shooting or to your combat are ways that bit by bit my army will start to die. Because it's very elite. There isn't that much in the army. It's, you know, 9 zone thropes, 2 units of warriors, and then the monsters and stuff, because the Biovores and the Tyrant Guard, they're just there as support units. They're not really holding the board for me. So if those units start to die out, I start to lose board control quite quickly, and then at that point, I'm not doing as many mauls, I'm not doing as much combat, and the list kind of crumbles at that point if you can get around that. So talking about that as well, my list deals a hell of a lot of mortal wounds, but it doesn't like being dealt mortal wounds back. They're very elite. Every zone thrope is 4 wounds, every warrior is 3 wounds. If you start dealing a hell of a lot of mortal wounds at my list, it'll start to crumble. All I have is Catalyst as the main way of dealing with mortal wounds, and 1 imperative for a fire up against mortal wounds. Apart from that, there's nothing else that I can do. So if things start smiting or start dealing mortal wounds in shooting or combat, the units will start to die. Elite armies like this, any form of elite army does suffer from mortal wounds, and this one is no different. So even though it can deal it out, it can't really take it too much. So that's the ways you can deal with it. Obviously, I love the army, but there could be some changes I'd make to it, and if you were looking to take this to an event, let's look at some changes that I could make and that you could make to take an army like this to an event. Alright, so modifications and changes I would make with this list. There's only really a couple that I would consider. The first one has to do with the Harpies. The Stranglethrow cannons are very nice, but the damage they have can be a bit low and a bit lackluster, so I would try and find the points to upgrade them to Heavy Venom cannons. That would be the first thing. Possibly by dropping the Spore Assist, maybe getting me a CP in that way, but we'll see. The second one is a bit more of an option to try out and test out, and that is to do with the adaptive trait. Right now I'm going with Augmented Ferocity for +1 charge, but I would look into Ambush Predators instead, which is heroic intervention for the army. This would allow the warriors to sit on objectives and not have their primary stolen quite easily by little units getting in there and taking the objectives, because they wouldn't be able to take the counterpunch from a heroic intervention from the warriors. And that's a way that I would be able to lock down primary a bit easier and help the list out. So there you have it. That's the modifications and changes I make with the list. That's the list itself, and I had a really good time with it. So if you really enjoyed this video, please head down there, hit like and subscribe so you know when we release one of these videos. And if you enjoy what you do, you enjoy this content, please head over to glasshammergaming.co.uk and join the elite. We'll be on for another Rust review next week, so please have a look, and we'll see you next time. Bye guys!
Live stream Warhammer 40k games, meta-analysis, tournament reports. Hi guys, I'm Manny. I am one of the co-founders of Glasshammer Gaming. I'm one of the current top 5 ranked ITC players in the world, and I play for my international team, Team England, and we are the current reigning world champions. So we started Glasshammer Gaming at the start because we play a very high level, and we realized that a lot of content creators online were more narrative and not really focused on the competitive aspect of the game, and we thought it'd be really cool if we made battle reports, live streams and tactics videos to help players improve in their competitive game, and also for people who are looking to start getting into competitive play, help them along the way and give them some tips. We also have an elite service, and if you join up, you get more in-depth meta-analysis, competitive tournament reports, and even bigger discounts on our store, which are incredible in the first place, and you're basically getting some of the best discounts in the world. If you join up, you also get access to our Discord server, where there are lots of like-minded people who also want to be very competitive and play to the best of their ability, and you'll be added in there with all of them. There are different channels for every army, every faction, so you can talk to other players who play the same armies as you and improve together.